With the season 8 finale coming up of Game of Thrones, viewership is said to surpass 2017's season 7 finale of 12.1 million same-day viewers worldwide. With that being said, CNBC's Kelly Lawler wrote in March 2019 in an article for USA Today talking about the tremendous recognition of the series Game of Thrones, the book as well, but specifically speaking to the series during a time of declining television viewership, and especially as Game of Thrones is considered a small screen show. Therefore, Game of Thrones has captivated audiences since the first book came out in 1996 and since season 1 premiered on HBO in 2011. But it is more than just fantasy fiction. Although some people see it as an interest or a hobby, it has transcended fantasy fiction and protruded into cultures all across the world. Therefore, the past few years, people have been studying the relevance of Game of Thrones and the implications it has on our modern day society. Because Game of Thrones has very outlandish themes and plot lines, it simultaneously speaks to some issues and events and themes that we face in our present day. So the 3 points that I will be looking at specifically within this cultural phenomenon are the gender differentiated roles within Game of Thrones, from male and female characters and the progression of their characters throughout the show, as well as the class and division of labor, as well as the distinction between Westeros and Essos and how those are reflective of Western and non-Western societies in our modern day. And finally, putting all of that together, showing the dynamic characters that audiences sympathize, relate with, and love, and the primary reason why this show is such a cultural phenomenon. So many women characters in Game of Thrones have shaped the preconceived notions of female gender roles as they live in this patriarchal society, such as Sansa Stark, who is married off in some of the earlier seasons and throughout to several different individuals to keep up her family name, but also to establish herself within another man's house. So that is one way in which females have these preconceived notions in a patriarchal society, but simultaneously there are women such as Daenerys Targaryen who step out of those preconceived gender roles and have tried to almost revolutionize or create a different type of gender role within females within the society that is unheard of and is something that so many people relate to and so many people want to attach to with that idea. With that being said, L.J. Clapton and W. Shepard in 2017 wrote Lessons from Westeros, in which they talk about females being persons of object within Game of Thrones and how in the earlier seasons that is something that is very apparent but that progresses throughout the series. Next, the division of class and labor is very apparent, especially in Westeros, as there is a central authority which makes it more of a Western-like, civilized, if you will, society. And then in comparison to Essos, which focuses on more the tribal system, such as the Dothraki, who are a tribe who move around and are kind of dispersed more throughout a greater land area, and they do not report to a central authority. Therefore, the show focuses more on the Western society, which in some cases people believe that this is a westernized perception of this world because it focuses on the world of the Seven Kingdoms. Clapton and Shepard argue this as well, and then Matthew Taunton in 2015 talks about why Game of Thrones is more than a fantasy, talking about the ostensible backwardsness of the Dothraki, and he speaks to this as well. And then finally, looking at those gender differentiated roles, the division of class and labor, it all ties into this progression of dynamic characters from season 1 until season 8 now, and how these characters, although they have continued to change in some aspect or another or lack thereof, they have also become objects that people can relate to, that people can sympathize with. Audiences love them, audiences love to hate them. And Sandra Lagier in 2018 wrote for the University of Press, Spoilers, Twists, and Dragons, and talks about how Game of Thrones, anything can happen. And that is reflective of our modern society nowadays. So many people have made comparisons to celebrities, politicians, to historical events, thematic ideas within the show, even though it does seem as if it would be fantasy fiction. There are so many relevant cases in which it is reflective. Therefore, although Game of Thrones is a fantasy fiction story and it is considered pop culture, as Clapton and Shepard said, popular culture may be fiction, entertainment, amusement, but it is also a source of knowledge for the world. And in this aspect, Game of Thrones is the biggest cultural phenomenon in the 21st century.